Hi. For the next few minutes, I'd like to tell you a little story. It's a story about a young father who's searching for some real answers for his family about the purpose of life. Now, whether or not the answers he finds are real, or pretend like scenery on a stage, well, that's really up to you to decide.
What you've kind of proposed, and again, we may be wrong here, but it's the one thing that's actually felt right to me about the nature of reality, that we don't see it as it actually is. In other words, we don't see truth. We see a graphical user interface that is a series of icons that are tuned to keep us alive and reproducing, but not tuned to show us the truth. And the underlying truth that is there may be much more interesting than we think. So, yes.
And this weird Mormon story that we've created over the ages and that we're continuing now in whatever phase it is, it's a story I wanted to keep living out. But it was very much about constructing my own reality in a way.
It helps me get over things faster, or at least this is what I've been learning and experiencing the past maybe 3 years. I go through something difficult and then I'm like, oh, I'm just supposed to feel the feels. I'm supposed to take the lesson, and then I'm supposed to let it move through me. And so many people let that energy get stuck.
This is Infants on Thrones.
Baby steps.
You want someone to preach to you.
The philosophies of men.
I like magical toys.
You want religion, do you?
Mingled with humor.
I don't believe in them.
There will be many willing to preach to you the philosophies of men mingled with humor.
We are evolving.
Baby steps.
You can buy anything in this world of money.
Look for the good in everything. Look for the people who will set your soul free. It always seems impossible until it's done. Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Ostland, and this is episode 739, What is Real? And today I'm joined again by Shelise and Mike from the Mormons on Mushrooms podcast to discuss some of the ideas of Donald Hoffman, professor of cognitive science at the University of California, Irvine, and author of the book, The Case Against Reality, How Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes. Now, another thing I'll be bringing into this is that in 1989, the Mormon Church put out a video called What is Real? And I watched this so many times, and I showed it to so many people on my mission. You might remember it as well. It tells the story of a young father who starts worrying about his newborn daughter. He gets super worried one night that she's going to grow up all nihilistic and resigned to meaninglessness and whatnot, asking questions about the nature of reality that he won't be able to answer.
Sandy, what's wrong?
She's gonna be gone at 20 minutes. And I don't have the answers.
What answers? What are you talking about?
The answers to the questions she's gonna ask us. I mean, like, who am I? What am I doing here? What is life all about?
Honey, she's only a couple of weeks old. Besides, I thought I was the one who worried about things like that.
Yeah, but you just can't run away from it. Look, someday she's gonna need to know the answers to these questions, and it's our job to tell her.
Why can't he answer these questions? Because he's not Mormon, and he hasn't met the Mormon missionaries yet. That happens later in the video. And then he gets the answers to all of his questions, because that's one of the main commodities that Mormonism sells, a sense of existential certainty, knowing that you know the one true truth. But is it really even possible to know the truth about reality? And is it really even healthy to attach yourself to a sense of truth and reality that isn't really a sense of truth or reality? maybe it's more healthy to just become comfortable with uncertainty. And this is where Donald Hoffman comes in, at least for me. So I sent a podcast episode to Shelise and Mike to listen to, and you'll hear a few clips from it in this episode today. And I'll post a link to that other podcast episode on the Infants on Thrones website under this episode. But today, you're going to hear Shelise and Mike and I explore this idea about the nature of reality and our inability to truly grasp what it really is. Not to make anyone here all nihilistic and resigned to meaninglessness and whatnot, but to recognize the role that our minds play in constructing the subjective reality that we live in, so that hopefully we can make more informed choices on the subjective reality that we want to create. But before we get to that, Mike and Shelise are going to talk a little bit about the Summer Solstice Divine Assembly Festival that they went to and did like all kinds of crazy drugs and stuff. So, all right.
Hang on to your hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
Okay, so I hit the record button. So I just want to have just like a free-flowing conversation about whatever you guys are interested in. And I kind of want to hear about how the festival was too.
Ooh. Yeah. Well, and this is great, Glenn, because as I was listening back this morning, so I was listening for the second time, that clip you talked about, or that you sent about reality.
This is the Donald Hoffman thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so at the festival, we can talk about this for a minute, because so Friday night I went on a journey, maybe took too much medicine that first night, as a newbie does. But it was very much about constructing my own reality in a way, right? So I felt myself zooming out and like being, well, I'm just wondering if we're going in too deep right now, but like being pulled out of the matrix in a way and seeing like the entities behind, it felt like there were several oversouls controlling several different people at the festival.
Controlling oversouls?
I don't know about controlling, but like piloting. I don't know. Puppeting. It was like puppeting. It felt like puppets. It did. It felt like, yeah. And then there was a moment where it's like, okay, which reality do I want to go back into? And it had this moment where it's like, I like my current reality. I like this story.
Mm-hmm.
This, it's in Western, or I guess, yeah, Western Utah out there. And so a lot of ex-Mormons, maybe even current Mormons at the festival. And this weird Mormon story that we've created over the ages and that we're continuing now in whatever phase it is, it's a story I wanted to keep living out.
What story is that? What is that Mormon story that you want to keep living out?
That's a good question. So the story I want to keep living out is this next phase, which to me feels like the liberation from it in a way.
So you want the Mormon story to continue, but you also want to be liberated from it.
Yeah, that part of the story though.
Do you mean you just want to continue reflecting on how it affected you?
No, I mean, this part where people are coming together as we're doing it on this podcast, and how you've done for many years on Infants on Thrones, waking up to like, oh, maybe this version I was told isn't the full reality. And maybe it's done me some harm, and processing that, but then processing the next stage, which is, okay, what do we do with it? What reality do we want to create now?
Yeah.
And co-creating it with all these people that, we're meeting at the festival, all these people that the community that's coming together, I feel like around healing. And I don't know if healing's the right word, but just coming together around what reality do we want to create now together? And that's the story that excites me, because I think as we wake up to the fact that maybe we weren't, I think it was in our last one we did together, Glenn, where we talked about how once you stop identifying as the victim, you realize you've had more control over this than you realize you have. And so maybe it's time we stop playing the victim role and play the role we want to play, whatever that is.
What is it? What is the role that you want to play?
I don't know. I mean, we're still figuring that out. Sometimes I feel like it's the martyr, and I'm like, no, I don't want to play that story anymore. I don't know, maybe that's what I'm still figuring out, but I like the fact that I feel like now I have more choice in what that role should be or what I want it to be. And that was my first night at the festival.
Yeah. So the experience you took a lot of medicine, probably more than you should have. And does that mean that you got like a little paranoid and you felt?
Yeah. There was a couple hours of paranoia, and it was hard because, we were holding space for people there in a way.
Yeah.
And so Shelise did a tremendous job that first night of keeping things afloat. Thank you, Shelise.
You're welcome.
Because Doug and I both did the same amount, and Doug wasn't quite as paranoid as I was. I had a few, I don't know how long. I mean, it was a long trip. But there was one where it felt like I was stuck in a maze, stuck in the Truman Show in a way, where everyone was telling stories around me, and it felt like everyone was in on it but me.
So you guys, so describe the setting for me. You were in a group doing like a group share, and Shelise was presiding.
There was no like
Structure?
formal ceremony or like get together within the camp. Everyone was kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
But real quick, when you said that, it kind of struck me. Everyone's in on it but me. It's almost like everyone was in the Matrix but you, and that's why you felt left out, because you were pulled out of that.
Could be. It felt weird. Yeah, it felt interesting.
More like everyone is unaware and you're aware instead of the other way around.
But then that awareness, that was paranoia. I mean, I was thinking, we are trapped in this maze. Here, we created this maze and we're trapped in it forever.
Right. That's kind of the awareness of the simulation of reality, right? That we're talking about here.
So you felt stuck in something, and it filled you with kind of a sense of dread and powerlessness.
Yep. That no matter what, I'm not gonna be able to escape this maze.
What would it? Yeah. Interesting. I don't know. I don't know what to say about this, Mike.
Okay, sorry if I took us on a weird path.
No, it's the perfect path because
yeah.
Okay, so Donald Hoffman is the one being interviewed, right? Am I getting the name right?
Yeah, Donald Hoffman is like
He's the
cognitive scientist or something from one of the California universities.
Yeah, so Hoffman talks about the organisms that they studied. Anyone that could actually see reality went extinct. When they weren't getting the fitness payoffs of being blind to their surroundings, then they couldn't deal. And I feel like that's kind of what was happening with Mike here. He like understood kind of what was going on and saw the Matrix for what it was, and everyone was just doing their fitness payoffs, and he was like, I can't do this anymore.
Okay, interesting. Is it what is the, like, when you both talk about the Matrix, what do you mean by the Matrix?
When I refer to it, I'm just thinking of like a holographic simulated reality, something that we're dropped into as a consciousness, but we're not actually physically a part of. We're just kind of experiencing the physicality of what we call life.
Okay. So is that what you feel like, kind of like right now, what we're experiencing, even though it seems like we're sitting looking into a computer, seeing each other hi and talking in this microphone, that all of this is really kind of a holograph, and that there's some kind of conscious agent that exists outside of this experience, but it's experiencing it through each of our perspectives subjectively?
I mean, that's one way to look at it, but
that's a lot of words.
But I also feel like
we
are the conscious agent that's controlling it. I mean, we know that there is a higher power, and we are all, I mean, if we want to go along with Wendy Kennedy's story of oversouls and soul groups and whatever, then maybe there is a higher power. But I think when I'm just thinking about myself in a simulation, I don't feel like I'm being controlled by someone else out of the simulation. I feel like I'm controlling it myself. So I am the avatar as well as the person playing the avatar, controlling the avatar.
Okay.
And it's interesting because you talk about, how I would describe the Matrix, and I think some of the paranoia that was coming up for me, if I'm thinking about it in my personal life, is I'm at this festival for the first time, meeting listeners of the podcast, meeting members of the community, meeting just a lot of cool people, and really loving it. And I like my corporate job. I also feel trapped to like the corporate, submitting vacation time and being trapped at my computer for many hours of the day in Excel spreadsheets. And I think lately that's a maze that I've been trying to figure out how to get myself out of. How can I free myself up to really live a more adventurous life, maybe, or more of a free life? And I feel like that was kind of playing into that. And, during that dark part of the trip, and I realized, someone saw that I was having a hard time and thought, okay, I need to distract him. So let's go to the story time workshop, which was one of the reasons why I didn't know I was in a story time workshop. I thought I was just there, and so that's why people were telling stories around me.
Oh, okay.
I found that out later. I was talking to him and I was like, why? I got all these lessons about stories. And he said, well, yeah, I brought you to a story time workshop. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But one of the things that shifted, so it got dark, but then the last half, so it was LSD, which, is a long time. And
how much did you take?
2 tabs. I've never done 2 tabs before. This is only like the first time I've really only done a full tab once before.
Okay.
And
then you did 2?
I did 2. Yeah.
So
did you stack it with anything else, or it was just the LSD?
Nope.
Okay.
That was just LSD. I guess I'm a little bit of a lightweight. I don't know.
I wouldn't say that. I'm just asking.
I didn't know if you were judging me.
Nope. Not judging you.
But then there was a moment that came, and it was when we started dancing. So we had this neon paint dance party that Shelise put together beautifully. It was amazing. The neon paint, the tapestries, all of it. People were there, their bodies painted, their faces painted. I had my toenails painted, and they like neon, and they
glowed.
But I had this moment where it was like, okay, if we are in a maze, I love mazes, because the point of the maze is to figure your way out.
Yeah.
And so we trap ourselves maybe in these mazes until either one of us or someone we're with or ourselves, we figure out, hey, I know a way out. I know a better way. And I think that's a part of the conscious experience, is that we keep putting ourselves in mazes and new mazes. So one of us or us figure it out and figure out this is a better way forward, or a more expansive way forward. And I think that's part of expansion.
See, but that's also kind of what I was thinking when you were talking about being in your corporate job and how do I get out of this? I almost said, well, do you think part of you likes being stuck, because then that allows you to process more healing and process more things that you want to grow and expand on that you couldn't otherwise do if you were in a free job, for example. And he talks about that too with having the cheat codes of the universe. If we're playing a game and we have all the cheat codes, it's actually not fun. You don't want to play the video game if you know all the answers.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of life.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Donald Hoffman thing is basically, he wrote a book called The Case Against Reality, which I got and started listening to. I'm probably only about a quarter of the way through it. And he covers a lot of things that he covered in that podcast that I shared with you guys, but he goes into way more detail about it. And the main point is that there is an objective reality. He says, like, so if Doug were here and he's like, oh, you're getting me into my solipsism. No, he's not saying that there's nothing that exists except for you. No, there's plenty of objective reality, but the way that we experience it is through these physical senses that were evolved from our DNA, that evolved over years. And the reason that we evolved the way that we did was because of what you said earlier, Shelise, these fitness payoffs. There are certain things, like we didn't evolve to be able to see oxygen. It wasn't necessary to see it. But the way that we experience it when we breathe it in, if we get too much of it, we get lightheaded. If we don't get enough of it, we get lightheaded. And, there's things like that. So there's a fitness payoff for being in an elevation or someplace that has just the right amount of oxygen, and we evolved. But that's not real. That's not reality. Reality is, I don't even know how to describe it. That the objective reality isn't what we perceive it to be.
It's the same thing trying to understand then a video game. If you're looking at, Grand Theft Auto, right, you're going, okay, so what I'm seeing here is a car and a bad guy and a this and that. Right. Is that really what's there? And the, some people would say, yeah, no, that's there because they're deluded. But then scientists would say, no, that's not what's there. Don't be stupid. What's there? Take out a magnifying glass and look at the screen. There are pixels there. Right. So what's really there are pixels. And then if you go back even deeper, it's the little tinier pixels.
Right. And then if you go behind the screen, you'll see it's circuits and software that are hidden behind the whole screen itself.
And is that in that analogy, is that the true nature of reality there? Is that base reality?
Well, that shows the difference between what we're perceiving and whatever objective reality might be.
Right.
So it's a good metaphor to help break us from the idea that of course we're seeing the truth. When we see an apple on the table, or we see the moon, it's just natural to think, oh, of course I'm seeing the truth. My friends see it, and they can see it when my eyes are closed, so of course I'm seeing the truth. And I'm saying, no, this is all just a headset, a virtual reality headset that we've got on. And I look at the moon, I render it, just like in virtual reality. I look over in Grand Theft Auto with a virtual reality add-on. I look at my steering wheel, and so I'm rendering a steering wheel. But now I look over there, I'm no longer rendering there is no steering wheel because I'm not creating a steering wheel. There is still, in that metaphor, the circuits and software and all the program of Grand Theft Auto that I'm not seeing at all. I'm just seeing the stuff that I render as I look around. I see cars and steering wheels and so forth.
And not only that, but if you saw the circuits, if you saw the base reality, objective, the thing in and of itself,
right,
you would not be able to play or survive in the game.
Right. The guy that just sees the steering wheel and the gas pedal and so forth will beat me. If I'm in there trying to toggle voltages in the computer to try to win the game, good luck. I won't be able to do it quickly enough.
But that's not real. That's not reality. Reality is, I don't even know how to describe it. That the objective reality isn't what we perceive it to be. And we don't really have a way of knowing what it would be because we can only perceive what we can perceive. Mm-hmm. And so he makes these claims that I still don't understand how he gets there. But like, if you're looking at a red tomato, that red tomato, you think that it exists in space when you close your eyes, but it doesn't. Because that red tomato that you're looking at isn't really a red tomato. What you're looking at is kind of like a desktop icon on your computer that you would go, okay, I'm going to click on this icon right here, and it's a red tomato icon, but it's really all of these, to use like Alan Watts terms, wiggles of like energetic wiggles that are doing all of these complicated things that we experience as a red tomato, but that's not really what it is. And what reality actually is, we don't have any way to know because we only have this icon interface through which to experience objective reality.
It's important to understand this. There's a few things you said here that will make people go, wait. It made Einstein go, wait. Mm-hmm. So you're saying the moon doesn't exist when I don't look.
That's exactly right. That space and time themselves do not exist independent of us. So most of us think that space-time is fundamental reality, and all the objects inside space-time are on the stage, this pre-existing stage of space-time. And I'm saying that that whole idea is wrong. That space-time is something that you create in this moment. You're the author of space-time. You're not a bit player that's shown up 14 billion years later after this stage was set. So we are the authors of space and time and all the objects that we see. We're not bit players in space-time.
Space and time are constructs of our interface.
Absolutely.
Now, but so this is where it becomes very solipsistic if you're not careful. Solipsism meaning that, no, I am the only thing that exists and I create the world and everybody else is a figment of my imagination and so on. How is this different than that?
Yes, I'm not a solipsist. So a solipsist would say that, as you said, that, we're creating all this and there's nothing but me and my creation. And I'm saying that there are other consciousnesses out there. I'm talking with you. I believe that you're not just a figment of my imagination.
Why, thank you.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me.
That's right. And I'm not a figment of your imagination. And that puts certain responsibilities on me. Even though what I perceive is just an icon of Zubin, I need to be very, very careful how I treat that icon, because in interacting with that icon, I could literally cause pain to the consciousness of Zubin, and you could cause pain to me. So our interface gives us a genuine portal to other consciousnesses, all human consciousnesses. My cats are my icons, but I believe that my cat icons are portals to real conscious creatures that, again, I don't want to hurt. And a mouse, ants, and so forth. It goes all. The interface, I claim, is all to other consciousnesses, but the interface is like a visualization tool. And of course, a visualization tool is there to sort of hide the complexity and dumb things down and so forth, because we'd be overwhelmed by all the consciousnesses out there. And so that's what space-time is. It's a visualization tool.
We only have this icon interface through which to experience objective reality. And I'm not quite sure where to go with it or what to do with it, but I just thought it's such an interesting idea, especially some of the things that we've been talking about, to bring that in. So had you already listened to that, Doug or Mike, before you had your experience, or you listened to it afterwards?
When did you send it to us? No, I listened to it afterwards.
Yeah,
It was after. It was the week after. So I hadn't, but when you sent it, I was like, holy shit, this just feels like it ties in to that.
Okay.
And I loved his example of, I think he was using a Grand Theft Auto analogy.
Right.
When you're playing Grand Theft Auto, you're seeing the screen, you're seeing the characters, you're interacting with the cars and the people in the game. But really what's happening is behind the scenes is all the ones and zeros and the circuitry and the electrons. And so if you think of that, so
that would be the matrix that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked how he used interface to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an interface, which is interesting because a few years ago I learned about the universe basically being ones and zeros. Like when you break everything down to its smallest particle, it's just math, which blew my mind, which is why so many people are interested in numerology. It's like numbers are the universe, which I find so interesting. I think it's really fun, and it's cool to hear it from a scientific perspective, because I have heard a lot of these things and even experienced them in the spiritual community and in those circles. And I think I mentioned before with you that on one of my mushroom journeys, I felt like what I experienced was being on a ship looking at the computers that ran the simulation for Earth. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a simulation. It's so cool that we have people wanting to break it down in math form and to kind of prove that, which he did, right? Like he actually proved that it's a simulation in some way, shape, or form.
I think, I don't know that I'd go so far as to say that he proved that it's a simulation, but I think what he's able to demonstrate is that most of the things that we assume to be reality aren't actually reality. It's just that perception of reality. And the book, A Case Against Reality, he really does go step by step, walking you through it. And like I said, I'm only about a quarter of the way through it. It's fairly dense. It's not as easily accessible, I think, as that podcast conversation was with that Zubin or Z-Dog, whatever that guy was. I liked him, that doctor.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the solipsism point. And this is where I wish we had Doug here too to talk about this, because he always goes off on this. But and I think that was part of my paranoia when I was in the story time workshop, was that, this really is just me, and everyone are just actors, or just figments of not figments of my imagination or whatever. They're not real. I'm the only real thing, right?
Right, yeah.
But I do love how he was talking about, and I relate to this more, how it's not solipsism. It's the fact that we are really, in reality, we are different. I mean, we're all one, but like we're all different entities, but we have this experience, this interface that allows us to connect with each other in beautiful ways or in different ways. And it's through that interface that enables that to happen. But
another way of looking at it is that because of the interface, we have the illusion of separateness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's this system of filters, layers on filters and filters and filters, where even though if we were able to see reality for what it is, as just this matrix of squiggles and ones and zeros and that sort of thing, where does Mike begin and Shelise end in that sea of energy and what it's doing, and where there's no time, and like it is all one thing? What is it that's giving us this experience, and that we just don't know? Like what I think what he does is he shows that our best science is telling us that we just really don't know. There is so much more that we don't know than what we do know, that really becoming attached to any one explanation as to, this is reality, is foolish, because there's just so much that we don't know. And that's where I think I'm trying to figure out a way to do a parallel to what you said earlier, Mike, about Mormonism and the Mormon story that you want to embrace, but also liberate yourself from. Yeah. And there parts of that Mormon story for me is we've had revealed truth. So we know the truth, and the rest of the world doesn't know the truth. And we need to give them the truth, and it's this certainty about stuff that's what I want to liberate myself from. So I don't want to continue that story by going, okay, now I found another thing that I'm attached to, that, this is how things really are now. And, now I've found mushrooms and LSD and other things. And now I know what reality is really like because of this, and instead of just going, man, you could put a chemical in your brain and it alters your consciousness so greatly, that what does that say about this mind that filters reality and what is really going on? But I've heard people before say, okay, so if you really believe that everything is just a hologram and the matrix, why not just go stand in front of a bus? Go stand in front of a train and see what it's like for that hologram to hit you at 55 miles an hour or whatever it is, like that's not what I want to do. That's not the point of saying that everything's
totally different argument, though, because
but that's where people go when they say it's not. You say it's not real. Oh, it's not real? Well, then why don't you jump out of the window and see if you splat?
Reality is all relative. Like, how real is your face on my computer screen? You're not in front of me. How do I know you're real? Like, there's many arguments that can be had about what is, quote, real based on someone's own perspective.
And I think there's a difference between real and meaningful.
Yeah, maybe. But if you're going to go stand in front of a bus, how does real or meaningful help you? You're going to get hit. You're going to die. There's like real world consequences that have to be taken into consideration, even if you're saying that it's just a matrix or a hologram or something like that. It's
right. But like if I'm playing a video game in Grand Theft Auto and I hit someone with the car, that there's going to be consequences in the video game. It's the same sort of thing. Like, from what perspective are we looking at reality? If I get hit by a bus and now my consciousness is floating in a different dimension, that was my reality, but now my reality is a different dimension. So I mean, I think reality, you can't even pinpoint the word, because it all depends on perspective. When the fireworks go off on July 4th and dogs think that there's bombs happening, that's their reality. Whether or not it is real, it's all about perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that if you do stand in front of a bus and you're killed, that's not the end of your consciousness. You're just in a different, you're no longer having that consciousness filtered through your body and that experience. You're floating somewhere else, and that you're experiencing something else with that consciousness that isn't the body, the vehicle anymore. Is that what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
and that's my perspective and my reality. So my belief is that our consciousness moves on after our vessel or our avatar passes away. That's my perspective. Now, it might not be someone else's. I know there's plenty of people that think we're just like gone when our body dies.
Yeah.
But that's something that I choose to believe in based on my own experiences.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, like, so I love your point, Glenn, about not just trying to find a new truth and then proselytize that truth. And so, like Shelise, I think I've come to believe now more in that there's more to existence and consciousness than just this thing reality we're seeing.
Yeah.
But there's also the part of me that's like, I don't know that either. I don't really know. I might believe that now. And I'm just thinking of a parallel here when you're talking about walking out in front of a bus. Is there something similar to, how when we were in Mormonism and you would hear the phrase like, oh, if I left the church, I don't know what, I would be having sex with hookers and getting drunk and doing, all sorts of heroin. I would go off the deep end. Right. That the fear and the guilt were the only things that were helping me live a good life. Is there a parallel there a little bit with like, well, okay, if this isn't reality, why not just end it?
I think
Or am I
so.
stretching that?
No, I think so, because that's what I experienced. And I told you guys on my mushroom journey when I kind of was zoomed out and was like, oh, none of this actually matters. Maybe I can just like peace out.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't need to be here.
Yeah.
So I do think it makes a difference.
When you say none of this matters, there was a moment when I was talking about coming back to this story, to my current story that I'm living.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason why I wanted to come back to it is I felt like there's still I'm learning something here. There's an expansion to be gained here for myself, maybe, and maybe for others, where we've invested a lot of, I don't even know what this means, but like a lot of collective energy in this current quote unquote reality, this current interface of, past lives, or, you think of even just focusing on the Mormon story, the Mormon pioneers who crossed the plains, I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase this, but there's just a lot of things that I feel like we are collectively learning from this story, and there's meaning to that.
There's meaning that you assign to it.
Yeah. Do I just want there to be meaning to it?
I think that's part of it. I think as humans, we assign meaning to things, and we say, this was a life-changing experience and I'm never going to forget it. And it may not be life-changing to someone else. It's the perspective in which you're experiencing that certain thing. And that's kind of what I was talking about, is usually when I experience mushrooms and I zoom out, like, oh, it's not that serious. Like, they're just lessons. They're just experiences. We're not meant to be defined by our experiences. We're just meant to learn the lesson and move on. But I think as humans in this density, in this like hard emotional planet, we just attach so much to it and we make it our entire identity instead of just growing from the experience and moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. So what do you do with that? Like, how does that help you in your life to have that kind of view?
Well, because it helps me get over things faster. For example, like if something terrible happens to me, or at least this is what I've been learning and experiencing the past maybe 3 years. I go through something difficult and then I'm like, oh, I'm just supposed to feel the feels. I'm supposed to take the lesson, and then I'm supposed to let it move through me. And so many people let that energy get stuck in their system and they just get blocked, and then it just cripples them, which I totally understand. Everyone has their own journey, and maybe that's part of their journey, is to learn how to free themselves from that at a later time. But what I'm learning and experiencing is that if something bad happens now, I can look at it from a point of view of, what was I supposed to learn from that?
Yeah.
Or was I just supposed to get angry and feel what anger really feels like, and then be like, oh, okay, now I know what anger feels like, or now I know what deep betrayal feels like, and I can move through it instead of getting stuck in that story.
Yeah.
And let it go.
Yeah, and let it go.
What if you want to stay in that story though, and you don't want to let it go?
I think
you don't want to move on.
Yeah.
You just want to kind of like keep experiencing that thing over and over again.
Well, right. That's what you were just talking about, Mike.
I think there's an element of you can and you will. If you're not willing to let it go, I feel like you will keep living that. It reminds me of, and at least what you were talking about, it reminds me of an experience I had this week where I woke up from a dream like at 3:30 in the morning, and very old patterns of waking up feeling super anxious. And I couldn't go back to bed. And getting caught up in like mental loops of rumination that I haven't got caught up in them as much since I've been doing like therapy and plant medicine. And, but it was just a very old pattern. And I woke up, I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to go back to sleep. So I did Kundalini yoga, did some meditation, and then still was kind of caught up in that loop. Went to work. I still work from home for COVID, but in the middle of the afternoon, I'm like, I just need to sit with this. And what you were saying about feel it. And so I sat in my room, I welcomed the feeling, and I just started sobbing for a good 30 minutes or so. And at the end, I wasn't ruminating anymore. And I remember thinking later and reflecting on it, I'm like, oh, in the past, I probably would have been stuck in that loop for a couple weeks, maybe even a month. But because of what we're learning and this experience of, oh, feel the feeling, welcome the feeling. And then when you felt it enough, ask yourself, can I let this go?
Yeah. And
it might be, nope, I still want to feel this. Nope. Or I still want to hold on to this. Or nope, this person really pissed me off and I still want to be angry at this person. Okay. Give it some time. And then still welcome the feeling, allow it to be there. And then ask yourself later, can I let this go? And maybe then you'll be like, yeah, I think we can let it go. And it's not always that simple.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it comes with a lot of grieving or other emoting, expressing anger, crying, all sorts of things. But whatever it is, I was able to move through that in less than a day this time than it taking weeks in the past. And I think that's a sign. I don't know. I like that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So you feel like you've created some kind of metacognitive skill to be able to observe your feelings and not let them control you, but kind of make a choice on how you're going to react and respond to them instead of what might be deeply ingrained instinctual responses.
Yeah. I think I'm doing better at flexing that muscle's getting stronger, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago on that Facebook group, that Sangha page, I posted a poll with some questions on it?
You posted a couple, didn't you?
Well, I just posted one poll.
I think it might have been, there were a few being posted around the same time.
Yeah, there was another guy that he had posted a poll about like, what do you believe in God?
Right.
And then I'm like, I'm not interested in that poll. I'm going to create my other poll. And so I asked these questions like, I'm responsible for how I think and feel. My brain creates 100% of my thoughts and my feelings. Just like a list of questions like that. And several people voted. what they thought about it. I interviewed a guy a couple of days ago named Dr. Jerome. It's the second time I've had him on Infants on Thrones. He's a functional neurologist. So he's a clinician. He works mainly, I think, with autistic children, but he takes this neurological approach. So I was so excited to talk to him, and I pulled up those poll questions. I'm like, what do you think about this? So like the question, I am responsible for how I think and feel, that was the one that got the most votes of people that agreed with it. And there were 46 people that agreed with that on the page. And he's like, yeah, that's not totally true. He goes, and he just gave me this awesome explanation as to why, you might think that you are responsible for how you think and feel, but the way that you think and feel has been conditioned over time since you were an infant, and even before, when you're in the womb. And how you think and how you feel, there are these deep pathways that have been there for a long time. And what happens is, as you get older, you get to a point where you start recognizing that this is going on. And I think that's what you were talking about, Mike. Like you became more aware. And in that awareness, you go, oh, I can choose what I'm going to do with this right now. And so at a certain point, you can get to where you can choose it, but you're not really responsible for how you think and feel. And the example he gave was his wife went into the laundry room the other day and let out this blood-curdling shriek. And he started freezing up because when he was, I think, 14, his dad had a heart attack in front of him, and his mom started doing CPR, and it cracked a rib, and then she screamed because he was gone. And so now anytime he hears a scream, he goes back to that place. He has that feeling in his body. His wife saw a cockroach, and that's why she screamed. And she grew up in a place where there was a lot of poverty and cockroaches and stuff. But she immediately, because they've been together for long enough, they know each other, she immediately poked her head out and apologized, said, hey, I'm sorry. And he was able to eventually calm down. But so he says, am I responsible for my fight or flight response being activated because there was that scream from my wife? It's like, no, but because I know what that is and I know why that's there and I recognize it when I feel it, I have a shorter refractory period, or however you want to call it. I can recover. And I thought that was really interesting. I loved having that conversation with him. Well, there was one other thing that we talked about that was from that poll about perceiving more or less than 100 or than 1% of everything that truly exists around me. Because that was a question that I had on here. I perceive less than 1% of everything that truly exists around me. And the people that answered that were kind of split. That's ones that said, well, I guess, no, there were 8 that said, I think it's more than 1%. And there were 25 that said, I think it's less than 1%. But that's where this Donald Hoffman stuff, I think, is so fascinating, because we perceive way less than 1% of everything that's around me. I mean, think about just right now in the conversation that we're having, there are thoughts going on in your head right now that I don't have any access to. Like, I might be able to see the expression on your face and make some kind of a guess as to how you're reacting or responding to what I'm saying, but I don't really know. Like, there's so many things like that I just don't have any access to.
Or even within my own body, let alone what's going on in yours. Like, there's things going on in my body right now that I might feel a certain sensation.
Yeah.
Like, my bladder's getting a little full right now, but like, I can feel
too.
that. But we can take
sympathetic bladders. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. But so many other sensations I'm not even aware that I'm feeling right now. I mean, there's a sensation right now in my, big toe that but now that I'm focused on that, I'm not focused on anything else. I'm not even focusing on the conversation or anything, Yeah.
Well, that dives into Joe Dispenza's work about how 90% of our thoughts are actually unconscious. And he talks about the neural pathways in the brain and how most of your days are just a repeat of the day before, because you act on the predictable future and it's safe and it's comfortable. And so the only way to actually change your life is by making the unconscious conscious.
Yeah, which isn't easy to do. And
No.
and the way that Dr. Jerome talked about it when I interviewed him is I think he said like 3 to 5% of your brain activity is conscious and the rest of it's unconscious. And it's so rapid, fast, like what your body is sensing in the environment around you goes beyond just the 5 physical senses, and it's making these calculations all the time that we're not even aware of, so fast, that then come into our awareness in the form of a feeling like a hunger pain, or like a bladder saying, hey, you need to empty me, or like all of these ways that our intelligent inner self that is our central nervous system. I mean, whether you want to call it like an inner self or a higher self or a central nervous system, it's this 95 or whatever percent of our neural pathways that we're not conscious of that are constantly regulating and monitoring and trying to keep things at homeostasis. And that's fascinating to me.
So then can we dive into the part of the interview where he talked about how consciousness is the only thing that exists?
Sure. Yeah.
That was so interesting to me. And I've heard something
And he's
similar.
speculating. He like doesn't have any proof of that.
Right.
That's what he's asking for. He's like, I'd love for somebody to be able to prove this.
Right, that consciousness creates reality. There have been experiments done, I think it was like 100 years ago or something. Have you heard of the double slit experiment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, and correct me if I misspeak, but they send photons of light through 2 slits to see how they react on the other side against like a wall, for example. And when they were watching it, or when they had a camera that was recording the act of the light being shoved through these 2 slits, it created a wave pattern. And then when they didn't watch it and they looked at the results, it was just all kind of, there was no rhyme or reason to it. They were just like splattered against the wall. So then the question is, so the act of actually perceiving something changes the outcome of it or the reality of it.
Yeah. I'm not well versed enough in the double slit experiment to really go in and say, oh yeah, you're right here, you're wrong here. I have heard people say that the way that commonly gets explained, they're talking about an observer and how an observer impacts things, and that there's sometimes some confusion around that, because what they mean by an observer is kind of like a glass plate that you put in between 2 things, so that as the light is passing through, it's passing through this glass plate. And when that glass plate is there, it takes what's normally in like a wave form and puts it in a particle form, but they can't really predict where it's going to be because it could be anywhere, but there's kind of like a field or something. So it's like a field of probability where this light exists simultaneously as in wave form and particle form. But depending on where you put that plate, or if you put that plate in there, it shows up as that. But it's not necessarily the same thing as a person who's watching it going, I want the particle to show up right there. And so it does, or I want this over there. So it's not like mind control of conscious observation that way, but it's just that the nature of the photon itself. Is it a particle or is it a wave? The answer is it's both, and it shows up as a particle depending on forces that we don't really understand, that we don't really know why it would.
I didn't hear about the plate part. The only times that I've heard about it spoken about, it was when they put a camera to watch it happen, it behaved differently. When someone was actually there watching it, behave differently. And then when nothing was observing it, it created something that wasn't really resembled of anything. It was just like random.
So the observation was
the
key.
act of observing. That's how I read about it. I should look into it a little bit more, but I found that interesting. Kind of like the whole, if a tree falls and no one's there to hear it, does it actually make a sound?
See, but I don't think that's a puzzle. I think that has a very clear answer to it.
I mean, yeah, I think though that's what he's arguing, Hoffman, is that if I put this apple or whatever inside the fridge, does it still exist? Or is consciousness what is actually creating that?
Well, it's the way that Donald Hoffman, I think, explains it is that so like that red tomato that I talked about earlier, that's our brain is rendering this image of a red tomato based on whatever the thing is that we're looking at, that the photons are bouncing out and they're being filtered through our biology to get there and render this image, so that when our eyes are closed, it's not rendering that image. Is that thing still out there in space and time? Yeah, but it's not a red tomato. It's only a red tomato when the way that humans have evolved to filter photons combine with the photons being filtered. So it's like 1 + 1 = 2, and you remove one of those variables and you don't have two anymore. So if you take human perception out of it, it's human perception that creates the image of a red tomato. Whatever that is in objective reality exists, but when something other than a human is there to perceive it, it looks different, or it is different. And if a tree falls in the middle of a forest and there isn't anything there to hear it to create sound, then it isn't sound. It's just air molecules that are moving around, but that's never turned into sound because there's nothing to transform it into sound.
Right. So then it gets into the question of, what do even infants see? Like, are they rendering the same way that adults render, or pets?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that we can look at their color senses, right? Like how they see it in color or not color. Yeah. But how do we know that a dog actually sees the ball as we see the ball?
Yeah. And the hard problem of consciousness that Donald Hoffman talked about, and he's like, this is the thing that I always want to know. The taste of chocolate, what creates that? Mm-hmm. Show me so like you said earlier, Shelise, that everything can be boiled down to like ones and zeros, basically, like up quarks or down quarks, or however you want to look at it. Okay, so what is the formula then? What is the mathematic formula for the taste of chocolate? Show me what that is, and show me what that experience is, and how we can duplicate that in any brain. That if I plug it in 1100 11100, that's dark chocolate. 1110, that's milk chocolate. Like where does the qualia exist? And I think it ties in that question about children. When they're born, they have the same biological constraints that we have with their eyes and their brains and their ears, and so that outside objective reality is being filtered in through a Homo sapien evolved perception machine, right? So there's going to be similarities there, but what exactly all is going on, I don't know. And so for me, when I feel like I'm swimming in this stuff so deep that I can't touch the bottom, and that there is no bottom to even touch, I start to wonder, like, what is the point of playing in this fun speculative playground anyway? And it kind of comes back to that cockroach example of, if I can become aware of my own response and reactions to things and realize it's not necessarily what I think that it is. So if I can detach myself from whatever story of this is how it is and go, wait, maybe it's not, then I give myself more options. I give myself more choices. And so I can, to your point earlier, Shelise, I can get over something. If there's a problem that otherwise would have taken me weeks to get over, now I can get over it quicker, if that's what I want to do. But I realize that it's my mind that is creating my experience of reality, mostly on automatic, because 95% of this stuff is unconscious, subconscious. Maybe it's 99%, who knows what it is. But if I can get in there just a little bit to have some influence and go, well, I can choose to be happy, or I could choose to be sad. I could choose to be grateful. I could choose to feel like a victim. I could choose to look for the hidden gift in something. I could like, how am I going to react? How am I going to respond to it? And that really does make a difference in how I actually feel and how I show up in the world. And that's where I start going, okay, yeah, there is some value in deconstructing reality in that sense.
Okay, so my brain just went to the crazy place. So
all right.
So going back to the infant, if we can't formulate the taste of chocolate. We can't formulate.
Oh, we can. It's just that science can't show us how we're doing it is the only thing. We can because we do.
Because I'm wondering then, are our experiences different than consciousness? If we go back to an infant who doesn't necessarily know how certain things work, they haven't been programmed yet, a blank slate. They can have experiences because they have all the basic needs. They cry when they're hungry and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So is consciousness different than experiencing reality, than like experiencing our senses? Because once we become conscious of something, does it change the way we experience things? Am I making sense?
I think so. You're asking if consciousness is separate from just responding to reality, or if it is like stimulus and response.
Yes.
That's where I think it's conscious agents all the way down, kind of like turtles all the way down. Where when we talk about consciousness, we're usually thinking about what we're most familiar with, which is human consciousness. But if you really stop and think about what is it that's creating that sense of human consciousness, it's billions and trillions of living conscious entities called neurons and different cells in our body, that each one of those is having a conscious experience that is not a human conscious experience, but they're responding to stimuli, and they're communicating, they're exchanging intelligence, and that's what regulates our body. That's what gives us our ability to reason and have cognition and process. And so
then
why
do you think
go ahead.
Do you think it's possible then that the conscious, so let's say me, the conscious Shelise that is speaking right now, can I tap into and communicate with the consciousness of my physical body, the consciousness that I'm completely unaware of, that is doing its own thing? Is it possible to actually have a conversation? And maybe, I mean, I guess you could argue that that's what healers have been doing for centuries, like in the East, for example, tapping into the consciousness of my bladder and healing it, or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when you're hungry, that is your body communicating to you. It's your cells communicating to you, hey, we're running low. We're running on low. Hey, you up there that is responsible for walking around and finding food and putting it in your mouth, go do that, and we'll take care of the rest of it. We'll digest it. We'll break apart all the nutrients. We'll get them to where they need to be. But what we need for you to do right now is go and get that food. So that kind of communication, I think, happens all the time. I think it happened in the cockroach example from Dr. Jerome that I should, like, anytime I think it's happening constantly. It's constantly. And one of the values of meditation and mindfulness is calming down all of the chatter in our mind so that we can be more in tune with what's going on in our body, instead of just what that worry, anxiety chatter is. I don't know if you could really focus on the bladder and go, okay, we're going to heal you. Or if there's like a place where I've got cancer in my body and we go, cancer be gone, and it listens to us and it leaves. I don't know about that.
But have you read the book by Anita Moorjani, Dying to Be?
Yeah.
So she did that.
Proof of Life, is that what it's called?
Huh?
Proof of Life, is that what her book?
No, Dying to Be Me.
Dying to Be Me, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, like she actually, so I guess it is possible. No one knows how she did it. She literally died from cancer that was ravaging her body. And she had a near-death experience. She saw herself, the doctors, and she had the choice to go back down. And when she did, she was like, oh, I just need to heal myself. And she was like cancer-free within months, a year maybe. Well,
I wasn't at this particular ceremony, and I don't remember if it was this last New Year's or the previous New Year's, but the shaman that I've sat with before in his group, somebody coughed up a tumor in the middle. Like they had like a throat tube. And so I saw the pictures of it, and they described what happened in the middle of the ceremony. Like he had come to ceremony as a way to deal with his cancer diagnosis. And in the process of doing this, that tumor was released. He coughed it up, it spat it out of this bloody thing. And, so I don't know. I mean, there's things like that happen, but I guess I really hesitate for the reason that I mentioned earlier before about the Mormon story of, I know the truth and I have the priesthood and I can control the elements and I have the power of God to make reality, whatever. Like that to me seems like a trap. And it seems like a trap of arrogance that is built on this huge fountain. Like the wise man built his house upon a rock, the foolish man built his house upon the sand. Like it's all sand. It's all shifting. We don't really know what this is, so we pretend that we do and pretend that we can have control. And then you go, okay, well, I've got this problem, I've got this cancer, so I'm going to do these things that these people told me that I need to do in order to get this result. And then if it doesn't happen, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? And it's like it just goes through that same cycle all over and over again. So I just get really resistant to any of that stuff. Although I acknowledge that things like that happen, I just don't know why or how or what.
Well, I mean, I was just saying that there was a time on my mission where I tried to rebuke someone's cancer and cast it out of their bodies.
Yeah.
And he died 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
But it was a thing. Well, first we went and this guy had stomach cancer, and we went and gave him a blessing. And then we had the blessing. I'm just like, this is not going to work. This guy's on death's door here.
Yeah.
And then we went to a zone conference, and our mission president was giving a speech from some book called like Invoking the Powers of Heaven or something, where you just have to have enough faith. And he got had this passionate speech that when we're giving priesthood blessings, we need to revoke the illness and cast it out of the body.
Yeah. And use the exact right words. And if you do it in exactly the right way, then you'll get the result.
So I got so much courage. I went back there. We're doing another blessing. And I revoked the shit out of that cancer. But it didn't work.
Yeah.
But then I
read
a
book
book
worthy, Mike?
It was I was the worthiest I've ever been, I feel like,
sure?
as far as Mormon terms.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You might have had some impure thoughts earlier that morning.
That's true. A lot of Brazilian women walking around.
Yeah.
But then, I think we've talked about the book Letting Go. You did that meditation that's really great on it, Glenn. But in that book, he talks about how love can heal. That frequency of love can basically heal anything. And that was really like that triggers something in me, like, well, then, but he talks about it. He even brings up in the book that, well, how do you explain when people are in hospitals and everyone's praying over them? And he says, well, what energy are they bringing? It's usually the energy of fear that they're projecting out. But if it were really love, maybe it would work. I don't know. But
that's
I go
what
back
Anita
and forth.
says.
But
that's what Anita said. Like, she healed herself through unconditional love.
Yeah, but maybe like if we go back to this whole thing of there's oversouls that are behind the scenes that are really pulling the strings of what are going on, maybe that's part of the experience. Like, I want to experience what it's like to die from cancer. Or I want to experience what it's like to stand in front of a bus and have it hit me, and that's the way I go out this time. These are the conditions of the world that we live in, and I want to know what it's like to struggle with it. I want to know what it's like to be so certain that if I just do it this way, it'll happen, and then it doesn't happen, and I get disappointed, and then I have to deal with the aftermath of it. I want to know what that's like. I want to know how I'll respond to that in this human form, at this human time. And so I gave a gospel doctrine. I wish I could remember exactly the way that I approached this, but this was like 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. And when I was in graduate school and I was studying folklore, and I was starting to view the stories of my Mormon upbringing very differently, I was a gospel doctrine teacher. And so I would kind of interject a lot of that stuff in my class. And there were some people that really liked it and some people that really didn't. And so one of the things I did was I took that scripture from, I think it's Moses, that this is my work and my glory to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. And I changed it. And I said, this is my work and my glory to make sure that nobody ever gets cancer, that nobody ever dies, that you always find your car keys. And, you know, and because what I wanted to say was, where are we really putting our focus on what is success and what's not success? Like where our relationship with God is working and where it's not working. It's because we have so many stories of these miracles. Like, I was going to drive to this place and I had this prompting, don't. And then, so I didn't. And then I found out there was this huge car accident and I would have. So thank you, guardian angels, for keeping me safe. And that this becomes God's role. I'm going to keep you safe at all times. And it's kind of the inverse of the prosperity gospel, where if you're good, God's going to bless you with blessings. Well, if you're bad, you're going to be punished. And I just like, is that really? Because what our scriptures say is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. It doesn't say that it's going to be the way that you think that it is, or that it's going to be pleasant, or, you know, he didn't say it was easy. He only said it would be worth it. Okay, slap me right now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I love it. I know, I'm loving it.
But I used to love twisting that around because I could see this is where people are putting their values. Anyway, go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, you're speaking to, like, I think we get caught up in what our conscious mind wants, but what about the experience that the thing that
the unconscious
that's really driving the show wants?
Yeah.
And it brings up a part on the recording that I was listening to as I was driving out to Shalisa's house. There was something he was saying about pushing buttons in the simulation to get us to experience a certain thing, and feel a certain thing, I would even say. And how much of that ties into, you know, when you do the work with your subconscious wants certain experiences here. And maybe it wants you to feel abandoned. Maybe in that cockroach example, it wants like your friend to feel that emotion of fear again with that scream, so he can feel it more and then release it. And so, and maybe that's jumping too far ahead, but basically our subconscious wants these feelings, and it's going to keep putting us in, if we're creating this reality, our reality is going to be experiences that get us to feel that certain thing until we're really willing to fully feel it, and we're at a spot where we can let it go. And then the story shifts.
Yeah. I mean, to get all woo with it, people talk about that in past lives as well. Like, if you don't learn the lesson you came down to learn and experience, in your next incarnation, you may keep repeating the pattern until you move through it and you're like, oh, okay, now I can move on.
Yeah. My I think my mom probably would be okay if I share this. I had her do or she wanted to do a psychic reading many years ago when I first became friends with Krista, the psychic, who I had on Infants on Thrones a few times. She did a reading for my mom, and I was able to sit in and be a fly on the wall and listen to it and record it so that my mom would have a copy of it. So I'm the oldest of 4, and I had a brother 2 years younger than me that only lived for 2 weeks. And he had some kind of heart problem, and just devastating to my mom and my dad, but especially to my mom. And so while she's doing this reading with Krista, she says, tell me about Mark, was his name. Like, do I have a connection with him? Like, what is that about? And she said, you know, you had this relationship in a previous life that was really, there was a lot of bitterness and animosity and distance. And so he came down and did this for you so that the next time that you meet, you'll both be so overjoyed to see each other that whatever karma, she didn't use the word karma, but whatever karma there was in that previous life just won't even matter because you're so excited to see each other. And that stretched my mind, because I had never thought, I'd never even considered anything like that as even being a possibility. And I don't think my mom had either. And whether it's true or not, it definitely helped my mom view that loss, even though it had been years. I mean, it had been 30 years or so since his death, but just kind of putting it in a different perspective like that. So yeah, the past lives thing, and that stuff that Wendy talks about as well with the Pleiadian collective, that you might be working out where in another lifetime, maybe even another star system, you were just dire enemies with this person because he performed some kind of act of genocide on your whole town. And you're like, I cannot forgive this person for what they did. So then you come to Earth and he ends up being your neighbor, and you kind of don't really like each other that much. And you get into little arguments about the, like the tree branches that are encroaching onto your property and stuff like that. And so you have to work it out in a way that it gives you the opportunity to make peace, where the stakes aren't quite as high, even though the range of emotion is super high, and something like a branch being over the thing might feel way blown out of proportion, but learning how to let go of that, to accept it. I've been feeling a lot lately as I've been paying attention to my own fears and insecurities, and thinking about what Dr. Jerome said about his trauma from his dad's passing, that it's not something that you really let go. Like, he's not able to reach into his brain and carve out those neural pathways and just get rid of them. But it's kind of accepting when they're there. Oh, okay. All right. And so, like, what is it that you're really letting go of? It's not like you're erasing it like it never happened, but it doesn't have the power over you anymore, but you're accepting that it's part of you. Not
right. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is letting go of the attachment to it.
Yeah.
Letting go of being attached to your pain, because people can become addicted to their pain, addicted to their stories, addicted to the victim mentality.
Yeah.
And then if you allow yourself to learn the lesson and move forward, you can actually make progress there.
Yeah. And another thing that I love about Wendy Kennedy, and that it's a departure from Mormonism, so it's a way of liberating me from that Mormon view of things, is that she'll say, don't judge the people who are staying in their victim narratives. That's the experience that they're wanting to have. That they're having the experience that they want to have. Your job is not to judge it, not to fix it, not to, but just to love and accept. And
not pull them out of that experience too soon too.
Well, I mean, you be there for them and whatever they want, like whatever you want. But I think especially in the spiritual area, and this is that Mormon narcissism. It's just so easy to go, we're awoke, they're not. Yeah. Like, we've got the truth, they don't. And man, we've done that before. I'm not interested in that again.
And it's easy to fall back into that when I'm thinking of like the festival and like psychedelics and healing, to be like, okay, no, now this is the answer.
Yeah. And any place you're like, all right, we know the truth, you guys. Us, we've got it. Them, they don't. And you see that in so many different iterations.
But here's the thing that just like popped into my head.
Yeah.
Like Mike was saying, oh, this is the answer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the answer for him. Maybe Mormonism is the answer for somebody else, because it's working in their current circumstances to perpetuate the reality that they've chosen for themselves. So maybe thinking about past lives in different dimension is the answer to me. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So it's okay to have different answers to the same problem.
And change your answers as you go along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure. Because at one point in your life, Mormonism probably was working for you.
Yeah.
And even now there's ways of looking at it. We're going, it helped show me ways that I don't want to be. And so in that sense, it's still kind of working for me.
It was interesting, Glenn, when you were talking about, maybe the having past lives or having other experiences, and then, now your neighbors, that kind of that story. It reminded me of another part of my LSD journey where I felt like, at this festival, it's an interesting time. Psychedelics are starting to become more mainstream again. Mm-hmm. There's, I think they're going to become very mainstream in the next several years.
Yeah.
So we're kind of at a bit of a tipping point, and especially in Utah, this is the first event like this they've had in Utah.
It's a Nexus event.
Yeah, okay. Right. A Nexus event. Man, I gotta love it. Let's do it. But And you have people approaching medicine in different ways. You have one that's it's basically a church in a way, the Divine Assembly. You have us that were there who are hosting a podcast about it. You have people there that are depending on it for their livelihood, that are, shamans and healers and energy workers. You have people who would like it to be more of their livelihood, but don't know how to do it, and you have people that they're just like, yeah, I just want to take drugs and have a good time, and so part of that, when I said like the oversoul and the puppets, I meant it more as I felt like we were playing on a smaller scale out scenarios that were helping something bigger than us, but we were playing it out on this small microcosm in this small desert area with this group of people. But it felt like different factions from different alien races and stuff, and they were playing it out in just this space. And a lot of it maybe this is just my own reality being projected out, but okay, the medicine's coming. How do we get it more to the people in a way that we're not selling it necessarily, or we're not trying to monetize it, but we're just trying to like promote it, but we also want to create abundance for ourselves so that we can facilitate it and really being in service to people with it. And that's what I was playing out, whether it was so much like a lot of my own story and my own narrative playing out, or whether there was something to that. I don't know, but
that's awesome.
It was interesting, and it triggered that when you were talking about the whole neighbor scenario. Yeah.
Cool.
Would have loved to have you there.
I know. Yeah. Like I wish I would have been there, but when I looked at pictures of it, I think I would have been miserable. There wasn't shade, right?
No, it was hot.
It was hot. It was like one of the hottest weekends. There's no shade. I would have been so miserable there unless I had like a camper and I was running the AC the whole time.
That's what we had. Yeah. It was, even then we're like, oh, we can't run it all day. So
right. Yeah.
And I think because of that, there was limited interaction between people during the day.
Yeah.
Which kind of
I didn't even see these guys.
Yeah. We emerged at night and saw Shelise, but but it was a cool experience. So a lot of cool, in our camp we had Mountain Tribe, the band played there both nights. Really good vibe.
Yeah.
The dance party was phenomenal. It was and we met some really cool people there. Yeah. And so I think it's going to build, and I think we're going to have more events like this. So there'll be more opportunities.
Do it in like a camping, like up in the mountains where it's cool and shaded, and I'll go there. I don't want to do it in like the desert face and like a Burning Man.
Yeah.
Trees and like maybe a creek.
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Actually,
Costa Rica.
My mom has Costa Rica is happening. So my mom has this amazing property with acres, and they're actually looking to put up teepees that you can rent out like for Airbnbs and like host retreats and stuff there. And they do have a creek and a pond and trees. So
all right,
that's in the future.
I look forward to the invite. That'd be awesome. Yes. That'd be cool. So I do want to ask each of you at least one last question if we're wrapping up. I don't know if we are or not, but so we talked about the Hybrid Children Project, and then I sent you the files.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear the return and report from Shelise on after listening to the Hybrid Children Project, what your response was, and then something similar with you, Mike, was the Bringing Home Here one that you listened to that you really, really liked. So let's start with you.
It's funny because that popped into my head yesterday.
Yeah.
As I was thinking about meditating. So, okay, this is like a small tangent, but it relates. So we just recorded an episode with my friend Kimber, who channels the Akashic.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I want to talk with her. No, but I want to, because you've talked about her before.
I have.
Yeah. Okay.
So she came on.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
She got booked up like by a ton of people after that release because everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
So there's a moment she says a prayer to kind of meditate and then get into the space, and when she feels her consciousness elevating into the Akashic record, she says the records are now open, you may ask any questions that you have. And right after she said that, there was like a white noise voice that came through that was none of our voices, and we're trying to isolate that now and figure out what the heck it was saying, because it was a voice, and I freaked out. I was like,
weird, right?
And you can hear it. You can go on our live episode and hear it.
Help us know Mormons on mushrooms in the light of the Akashic records, to see Mormons on mushrooms through the eyes of the Lords of the records, and enable me to share the wisdom and compassion that the masters, teachers, and loved ones of Mormon on mushrooms have for them. The records are now open, and you may ask your first question whenever you're ready.
Drink more mobile tea. I'm very the Mormon church is true.
How can we be a better source for creativity, inspiration, and healing within the communities that we find ourselves?
It was a voice. And I freaked out. I was like,
Weird, right?
and you can hear it. You can go on our live episode and hear it. And so I told her, and she was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Something is trying to come through and talk with us. And so we meditated on it, and I did. So that night, like, all right, who's trying to connect with me? And I saw green, I saw blue, I saw this trident that turned into a fishtail, and I was like, I'm in the ocean. It was like this underwater civilization of mer people, which was wild. I'm like, what is this? And Atlantis popped into my head. And then I thought, well, Atlantis, the lost civilization, was above ground. We know that it fell into the ocean, but before that, I was getting the impression that it was like beings that lived under Atlantis in the water, because we know it was also like on the water. And then the next morning, I had a message from one of my Instagram followers, and he was like, oh, that necklace that you're wearing looks a lot like a necklace from the movie Atlantis. I was like, what? Like, confirmation. And then the next day I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw another thing about Atlantis. So anyway, that sparked the whole thing of, okay, who's trying to connect with me? And then I thought, oh yeah, that thing that Glenn sent me was talking about how I could connect to the hybrid children that apparently I helped give birth to, or not give birth to, but use my genetic material for. And so it's funny that you bring that up, because I was just thinking about that. And now I want to, now that I'm kind of done with the revival, it took a lot of time, I can meditate on that and see if I can actually connect with something, because obviously it's possible. Things have been trying to come through. Yeah. And yeah, it blew my mind in some ways. Then in other ways, I'm like, yep, that's what I was told a couple years ago. And it's just so crazy. Talk about a crazy reality. The fact that it may be possible that there is some extraterrestrial being that took my genetic material to make children on another planet. I mean, how much weirder does it get? It's like, it's wild.
I love that.
That is wild. So now I need to send you her lecture on Atlantis.
Ooh, yes, please.
Yeah, I'll send that to
I want to hear this hybrid children one too.
Yeah.
Did you send that to me too, or not? Oh,
I'll just give you guys access to my Dropbox where I've got all the files in there.
Awesome.
You can go through and grab them.
Because I mean, also I listened to it on my phone while I was at work drafting some patterns. Yeah. And I didn't know that it was stuck at the 1 hour preview. So I didn't actually listen to the whole thing. You sent me 2 parts and I only got an hour of each. But yeah, incredibly interesting. And it does on some level resonate with me. I'm like, yeah, that kind of feels like it could be a thing. Especially since it's just so random and weird that I was an egg donor in this life. Like that was part of my journey, was donating eggs. And now I'm getting the feeling that, you know, someone else is taking them. Oh, that just, okay, something just clicked, guys. So
I love being here in person when you guys see these. It's just it's a different energy. I love it. Yeah.
So I donated eggs for the first time when I was, I want to say 21. And I did it consecutively 4 times, like within a year period, because you can't do it back to back. There's like all these hoops you have to jump through and you have to get picked and whatever. So I did it till I was like 24, 25. And then I did it again like 4 years later, because I'm like, you know what, I could do it one more time. And it wasn't successful. So when they took my eggs the first time, they were able to mature and ovulate about 28, which is a huge number for a donor. The next time I did it, they only got 5, and then none of them were feasible. I'm like, what happened to all my eggs? Granted, I was older, But still, now I'm like, maybe it's because the aliens took them.
You might have.
I hope there's some left for me.
Different donation. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you were telling that story, I remembered that, was it like May 25th, there was was it an eclipse, or there was like a big super moon or something like that. And so Cammie and I are out in the backyard just taking pictures of the moon. And the next day, I don't think you'd be able to see this.
I can see it.
You see this right here?
Ooh, wow.
Okay. There's a little
Wait,
light
hold
right
it
there
down
on my-
a little bit more. Down on the screen. Wait.
Yeah, I can see them. I mean, it looks.
See that little light?
Oh,
Yeah.
right there.
You see that little
Oh.
light that's moving?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So we didn't know, and it drops behind the trees.
Yeah, that's definitely
Yeah.
a ship.
Right?
100%, like no doubt in my mind you saw a ship.
Like we didn't see it. We were just like taking pictures, but you know how like your phone can
Yeah.
do like, oh, this is a live picture, and then it moves like a Harry Potter newspaper article or something.
Yeah, Harry Potter.
There's this little like ship that zigzags and then drops down. And I'm like, okay, that was their way that they were saying hi.
Could you send that picture to us?
Yeah.
I can try.
Okay.
I can
Sometimes
try.
the
Yeah.
lives don't come through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the lives don't always. I converted it to a video,
Oh.
but it makes it fuzzier. But
Okay.
yeah, I'll do that.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And Kimber was talking about how a lot of times ships cloak themselves in clouds. So if you see a cloud that kind of looks like a spaceship that you would imagine.
Would Kimber do another interview with you?
Probably, yeah.
Ask her.
You want to join?
You want to join?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to ask her questions about Joseph Smith being like visited by aliens, and see what she gets. Because I did interview Christy.
Uh-huh.
Did I send that to you
Yeah.
guys?
Wait.
You sent us parts. No, you did. You sent us the full thing. Yeah.
To me too?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't remember.
I think so.
It was right at the
I think
beginning.
so.
This was
Oh.
months ago.
Oh no, but I interviewed her again.
Oh no, then I haven't.
Like no, just like a few weeks ago.
No, you didn't send us that.
Yeah, and she talked a little bit. She didn't talk a ton about it, but I kind of want to compare what she says to what Kimber says, just because I'm curious. You know,
Yeah, let's do.
I think that'd be interesting.
I'll ask her if she wants to do a podcast episode with us, with you.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah,
I'm
I'd
curious.
love to do that with her.
I'm curious if she's ever gotten questions specific to Mormonism, because she did grow up in Utah. And so she has experience with Mormons, but not as a Mormon. So I think she would probably really fascinated to dive into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That'd be cool.
That would be cool. So then, how about you, Doug, with the bringing home here? Were there any things from that one that you? Oh, I keep calling you Doug this whole time today. I don't know why.
It's fine. I take it as a compliment. I love Doug.
Jeez, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wish I had my notes on it. It's been a few weeks since I listened to it, but let me just tell you the part where it really hit home for me, and this was my only other LSD journey I did, and that's the day before I met you in person, or 2 days before I met you in person, Glenn. But
yeah,
I had this experience where I was sitting there with the medicine. I was feeling really good, and then someone we were tripping with came up, and he was kind of watching me, and he's like, where's your attention at right now? And I'm like, you know what? I'm just like, I was sitting outside. I was looking at like the stars or the sunset, and just was really in it, but I didn't know where it was going. My thoughts were going everywhere. And he's like, I was just watching your attention go places. And he kind of talked about how, he's like, I see you, and you carry people's emotions a lot, but you don't have to. You just change your attention. Where your attention goes,
energy flows.
That's what, yeah. And so after that, I was sitting with it, and I'm like, always on these trips, I want to talk to alien beings. I want to talk to the Pleiadians. And I'm like, oh, I need to put my attention there.
Yeah.
So I got there. I went back inside the home. I sat down, started meditating, and just tuned in. And I was getting all these cool imagery of this alien race, this blue race. And like, well, I don't know if it's imagination or not, but that's part of it, right? It's trusting my imagination when it was coming up. And I got the sense that like there was this beautiful civilization, and we're bringing that here
Mm.
to this realm. And so when we go into the subconscious, when we go into these other places, sometimes we're bringing that realm here. And I asked them, I'm like, well, how do I do it? And the answer was, oh, you're already doing it. We're giving it to you.
Yeah.
All you have to do is receive.
Yeah.
You don't, receiving is the thing you need to learn here. You gave so much, and maybe that was part of the thing with, Mormon upbringing. You learned how to give so much of yourself. Now you're learning to receive, and that's all you have to do is receive it.
It's also kind of like where the Mormon way is, if you want it to happen, you have to do it. You have to make it happen. So how am I going to bring home here? Where the answer could be, oh, don't worry about it. Nature's taking care of that. It's like your inner body, like everything's taking care of it. And in fact, you being aware of it is one of the results of it actually happening, but you're not controlling it. You're not making it happening. You're just a result of part of what's going on. So trust.
And the more you try to force it, actually, the more your fists are clenched and you're not receiving it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going on whether you're trying to force it or not. And like whatever, just kind of trust and be open to it and love it. Yeah. That's
yeah.
cool.
And so then I saw you 2 days later and I was kind of recounting that to you. And you said, you have to listen to this episode, Bring Home Here.
Yeah.
And there's so much in that one.
There it is. Yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah, but that was the big thing that drew me to that one, and then we could go into the other one another time. But
yeah, if you had the choice to have a really intimate one-on-one conversation with a real live Pleiadian, or just your own subconscious mind, that 95% of what's doing Mike, which would you choose?
Ooh.
I only get one, right?
In this thought experiment, and then I'm gonna trick you. I'm saving that.
I would choose my subconscious.
I would not.
Yeah,
you would not. Huh?
I would not.
Well, I like this. Yeah.
The reason I would choose the other being is because I don't want the cheat codes to my reality. Because if I could ask myself, what are all of the answers, then how would I ever learn and grow as I continue on, knowing all of the answers? That's kind of part of the point, is figuring out yourself. So I would want to ask the other being more about other dimensions, maybe even smaller questions about my journey here and my purpose here, my mission. But I wouldn't want to talk to myself, because then I would know everything.
But is there an element that like those beings do live inside you?
That's kind of where I was going to go with it and try to tie it back to this Donald Hoffman stuff. No, because I don't think there's any way of getting around any conversation that you have with another person. Like my conversation with you guys right now is being filtered through my mind, being filtered through my interface. And so in a sense, it is a dialogue with my own mind, my own self. And if you're imagining a conversation with Pleiadians, that's it's your imagination. It is this little facet of your inner self kind of thing. I don't know that I'm not saying that that's the truth. I'm just saying that I had that idea. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely filters through your mind, but especially on psychedelics, when you remove the mind from the equation and you just have pure consciousness, I think that's a different conversation.
Wait, do you think that's what's going on with psychedelics? You have pure consciousness and you've removed the mind from the equation?
That's kind of where I'm leaning towards, because I mean, not to say that my mind isn't working, because it has to, or else I would probably die. But I think it's removing the logical side. It's removing the egoic side. It's removing the side that says, no, this has to be your reality. This computer is real and it's in front of you. And when I take it away, maybe taking away part of the interface, is when I actually have the experiential side of consciousness, without all of the filters of the brain trying to put labels on things so that I can understand it.
Interesting.
I'm trying to wrap my brain around that.
Yeah.
I love it though.
Yeah. I the thing that jumped out to me in what you said, Shelise, was about the logic, where instead of your mind always trying to figure things out logically, it's like there's more going on. It quiets that, it shuts that down.
Right.
And so there's more of a sense of kind of direct experience.
Yeah.
But
that's how I feel anytime I do
Yeah.
mushrooms. And that's why it's so hard to explain the experiences when you come back
Yeah.
to reality, because there are no
Right.
words for an experience that
Yeah.
that your mind can't logically
Yeah.
put a label on.
Same thing sometimes when you're trying to wake up and write down a dream, it's just kind
Yeah.
of like, I don't know how to put this into words. But not to talk too much about the Kimber episode, but she talked about something really cool. She said she developed a very strong imagination as a child, and she needs that now. It's so imaginative. And so I was just thinking that with your question, Glenn, about their subconscious and the imagination and Pleiadians, it's like trusting and leaning into that imagination. It's something I'm going to try to work on because I think for me, I wait for it to come and maybe things like images emerge and I'm like, oh no, I'm just making that up. But yeah, I'm just making it up, and lean into that.
But what is it that you're making up? You're making up the icons, the interface. And what are those icons, those symbols symbolizing? What are they representing? Where is the objective reality behind the icon that we really don't understand? And that I think would be a subconscious thing.
Yeah.
But did you listen to the question that I asked Wendy and her response?
Oh, no, I totally
when I
forgot
asked her
about that email. Oh, I can't wait to go back and listen.
Yeah, no, I asked her basically, like, is what you're doing real? Like, do the Pleiadians really exist in outer space, or are they in inner space? Is this part of your imagination, or is there really even a difference between those two things? And she's like, well, it just depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. From a 3D perspective, yeah, it's outside. But from a 5D perspective, it's all connected. And so whether you think of it as the imagination or you think of it as real, does it really matter? It's kind of the same thing.
That's what I was trying to say earlier, is reality is relative depending on your perspective.
Yeah.
Put down the weapons that you use against yourself. You don't need them anymore. Lay down the weapons that you use against the world. We don't need another war. Put down the weapons that you use against yourself.
Hi, this is Hillary.
Matthew, Ryan,
Carol,
Keith,
Ashley, and I like to play bingo online while listening to Infants on Thrones.
You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com.
And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes.
I did.
Anyone for the closing prayer?
My worst crime is an inside job. Dark thoughts taking over like an inside mob. I tune into the scene between the eyes and take a breath.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Throne.
I sit still and watch the thoughts float past me. Never mind the future, never mind what the past be. I like to jump and let the universe catch me. Free fall, watch the beauty blow past me. I keep my pockets light, destination in sight. Keep my actions elevated to compassionate heights. I'm walking past the fight, laying down on Sunday night. Choosing love when I pick up this mic.